What are you waiting for? It's time to thrive loud.
Hey, this is Lou Diamond. I hope you're all being well and safe. At the time of this recording, the coronavirus is spreading in late March of 2020 across the nation and quarantining many of us, self included. And I know a lot of us are going a little stir crazy and probably want a little bit of a distraction from any of the news about coronavirus, which is all we're getting every day, every minute. So hey, tune into some of these Thrive Loud podcast episodes. We'll get to the one we have coming up on this episode. Let's just do a little rewind here. Going back over the last week, we tried to educate you and lighten your day a little bit and share some wisdom from some pretty amazing people. I caught up with JJ Ramberg in the Good Pods episode, a great app where you can connect and listen. Basically, take Twitter and podcasting and make them have a baby, and that would be Good Pods. It's a phenomenal way to listen to podcasts and see what your friends are listening to. We love it. We use it. That's how I listen to all my podcasts now. So definitely go on there and you can comment and connect to the guests and the hosts, which is pretty cool. We had Gabrielle Hartley talking about her practice about Better Apart. Marina Kutab, the eco goddess, talking about zero waste lifestyle and lots of different great things that she's doing. She was awesome. That was a fun chat and conversation. We then did a special episode 430, March Madness. We just called it the Madness episode because there is no March Madness. Tony Chapman jumped on with me and we talked about what would happen if sports would go away and what's going on. And we were right before a lot of decisions had been made about sports. So it's kind of crazy and prescient, some of the things we talked about at that episode. Go check it out. And then I had an unbelievably fun episode, which you may hear a little bit more of. We called it Diamond Cuts Money Talks. Evan Money joined me. He's a guest that's coming up next week sometime on Thrive Loud. But you'll get to hear he and I talk about life, leadership, the NFL, and other sports. And the last two here, Mike Vulcan, the Vulcanator. Great talk about branding and entrepreneurship. And Holly Mignosi. We talked about her business, basically about embodying an image. So fun. And I actually had a fun time. I did a quiz with her. Well, go listen to the episode and hear how I did. But today's episode is a pull from the Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive podcast. We love featuring those episodes with Geoffrey Cooper, whose book Expire. And I think you'll like it. We have a fun conversation. He's got an interesting story, even interesting background of how he became an author and decided to write about this. So sit back and relax and listen to Geoffrey Cooper from Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive here on Thrive Loud.
Welcome to Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, a podcast show that provides you exclusive access to top writers around the globe and how they are thriving through their writing, their passions, and their lives. Here's your host, Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to Bedside Readings Authors That Thrive, connecting you to amazing authors that are thriving through their work and in their lives each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today, we have a former cancer researcher and scientific administrator, having held positions at Harvard Medical School and Boston University, who is now writing medical fiction. He is the author of the cell biology text, The Cell, as well as several books on cancer. His first novel, The Prize, dealt with scientific fraud. His second, Non-Disclosure, follows a case of sexual harassment that progresses to rape and murder. Coming to us from Algonquin, Maine, Geoffrey Cooper. Welcome to Authors That Thrive.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so you're working in cancer research and in the academia world, and somewhere in there you get a calling of some sort to make a shift in the career. How did that come about, Geoffrey?
Well, I'd been working in science and academics for somewhere over 40 years. And came time to step down from doing that. And I'd always, wanted to try writing. I think, as you mentioned, I'd written several nonfiction books, science books. But I thought once I had the time, I would take a crack at seeing how fiction went. So I tried it just to see if it was any fun and sort of kept plugging through it and actually wrote something and then kind of joined a writers organization and saw how real writers would think about it and got some editorial advice and went ahead.
Scientific fraud. I want to talk first about the prize. Obviously, in the world that you're in, you were very much around this. How much of your novel was based on reality?
A lot, unfortunately.
If you could share that would be great. What you can.
Well, the actual story and the characters are fictional, but many of the incidents are things that really happened. Fraud is terribly common in science these days. I think it's estimated that something like 0.1% of published papers actually have problems.
Wow.
And that can range from people doing minor manipulations of data to make things look better than they are, to people making up whole fake stories.
Right.
There's one that I mentioned in the prize of an HIV researcher who just made up a vaccine.
Huh. And unfortunately, this is probably too real because there's so much pressure and so much money and so much pride in that space and that profession.
I think that's a lot of the problem. People on the outside think of scientists as pure and after the truth, and many are. But the pressures are also enormous.
Yeah.
And you don't succeed by just being after the truth. You succeed by being right about something big. And so, especially for junior people or for highly ambitious people, those pressures can be a lot. Their job security, their money, their fame.
Yeah. Geoffrey, moving from something you knew really well, which by the way would be a great way to start the novel writing career, you went down an avenue focused on sexual harassment that turned into rape and murder. Where did this experience, or maybe more importantly, your attachment to the realm and understand how things are going, that this became the topic of your latest novel?
Well, unfortunately, that's also something that I've had a lot of experience with. The two major kinds of misconduct in academia are fraud and sexual harassment. And so, in addition to being a scientist, I was a department chair and associate dean for 15 or 20 years, in total. And I saw a lot of cases of sexual harassment. So this is, again, based on stuff that's reality, at least the start of it.
Definitely.
Not the murder, as far as I know.
as far as anybody knows, right? Or maybe that's a real mystery.
Well, as far as I know, I wouldn't say anybody.
The writing process. I love talking to authors about this because everyone's got their own. I learned as we started our call, you live in Algonquin, Maine, which share with the listeners what that exactly stands for, Algonquin?
Beautiful place by the sea in some Indian language, which has a very, very hard name to pronounce, and I won't even try it.
Is this where most of your magic is created?
It is now. I've been here for the last year.
Okay.
Having moved up here from Boston.
The writing process, is it very intensive, or you get it all done in one weekend, or is it spread out over time, or you're very regulated? I love hearing there's so many different ways to do it. What's your regimen?
It's spread out and it's probably a bit erratic. I make a very rough outline that changes by the time I get into the second chapter and is thrown away by the time I get, to chapter 4. And so I have an idea for what's coming next, and then I write it fairly intensely. And then I take a break and kind of think about what's going to happen next, and then I bounce back to that, and that's the way it goes. I would say on average, I write in the morning for 3 or 4 hours.
Geoffrey, do you enjoy the writing process itself, or the pregame, if you would, like the conceptualization of the idea, or all the post stuff that you have to do after you've created the book? I love, every author has a different opinion of what they love and what they hate in this creating a book process. What's your favorite of the book writing process for you?
I think I like the first 3 steps of it, by which I mean thinking it through, writing the first draft, and then going back to put it all together and make sense of the whole story. The process after that, where it becomes marketing and promotion, is not the part that I like so much. but part that I've seen is very necessary, because there are an awful lot of books published, and you got to do something to let readers know that yours is out there.
From somebody that has obviously a very research-focused career and a scientific administrative way of communicating, how much of the way that you write in this creative outlet mirrored maybe the way you communicated in your previous profession over these 40 years? Or is it a step from that, like a different way of thinking in the way you tell a story?
It's a different way of thinking. And that was one of the interesting things about the prize. I wrote it from my thoughts on writing, from having been a reader for all my life. And then I sent it out to, it had a real editor who was a serious writer and a teacher of writing. And what I learned from that review was that there was really a different way that I needed to put things together to be in the, sort of in touch with writing fiction and what was expected, and how to have more characters' points of views, and to keep chapters running consecutively and so forth. It was very different than the kind of writing I was used to. So the editorial process for the prize took probably about a year from when I had a completed draft until I really had a manuscript that was a done deal. And I learned an awful lot about that in terms of fiction versus writing science.
Geoffrey, when it comes to your world and your writing, these books are fun. They make you feel good. And obviously you're in the groove, having written two novels here. I love asking guests on the program this question. When you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Oh, I take a bit of a break, and usually, spend some time with a friend or two, just chatting about other stuff, science usually. Okay. And a little break to refocus.
I like it. Simple, break, come back.
Yeah, right.
Is there one author or creator or producer that you admire most that's sort of an inspiration to you?
I think my favorite author in general is the late Robert Parker. Okay. The Spencer novels, Jesse Stone. And I think his writing has influenced me a lot. In terms of somebody closer to what I'm doing, I guess I would cite Robin Cook, who was sort of the dean of medical thrillers and whose stuff I've always enjoyed. I think that's influenced me an awful lot in my own writing too.
Excellent. Geoffrey, the big takeaway you want readers and the listeners to this program to get from your novels as they're thinking about reading them and understanding, what you wanted them to take away from this message.
Yeah, I think the idea that scientists are really just human beings with all of the faults and flaws of any other profession. Greed, vengeance for people, who get in their way. All of the nasty things you can imagine, no different than businessmen or lawyers or anybody else.
Yeah, man, I was really hoping the academia world and those folks would actually be really good souled all the way through.
Well, yeah. A good thing to hope for.
Absolutely. Hey, Geoffrey, this has been great. I can't thank you enough for having me on the program today. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And to our listeners out there, keep thriving onward and upward. And thank you for joining us on Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive.
Thank you for listening to Authors That Thrive, brought to you by Bedside Reading. To learn more about today's guest, head on over to bedsidereading.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, or follow us everywhere on social media at Bedside Reading.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.